donc, nous accueillons pour cette table ronde pour nous parler de l'engagement dans la gestion durable des forêts méditerranéennes qui ne peut se concevoir que sans s'engager dans la formation des jeunes. Monsieur Yossef Ben Meir. Yossef Ben Meir, you are president and co-founder of the Atlas Foundation, a Moroccan-US NGO founded in 2000 and dedicated to sustainable development. You are currently a visitor professor at the University of Virginia, and you was a faculty member at the School of Humanity and Social Sciences at Alcanway University. You also worked as researcher at the American Institute of Migrant Studies. So we are very pleased to hear your presentation entitled Sustainable Management of Mediterranean Forests Cannot be Conceived Without Engaging in the Training Young People.
I'll begin with a little context of what the Atlas Foundation does in Morocco. The Atlas Foundation is a Moroccan-US civil association. We were founded by former Peace Corps volunteers about 23 years ago. Our mission, which is completely commensurate with Moroccan policy programs, charters, is community participation and development. Our first 15 years, we thought that if everyone were in the room, of course, in rural Morocco, we'd be in gender-separated spaces. But if everyone were part of the dialogue experience, the action plan that would come out would reflect the heart and the will of the participants. What we learned was that that's not the case. That when we're filled with doubt and fear, when we've never been asked our vision in our life, when we've internalized social controls, when they are external to us in the room, that we may make decisions and we may vote and we may express things that are counter what we actually feel in our hearts. That participation, as essential as it is, it's not enough at the outset. And so we changed our methodology about 8 years ago to begin with empowerment, to begin with confidence building, building our self-belief, the vision or the future that we want to achieve. It's 4 days. It analyzes emotions, our social relationships, our outlook of money, of work, of body, spirituality, of course, in the Moroccan context, that these critical aspects of our life bear upon to the extent that we know what we want, that we express what we want with determination, that we pursue it with vigor. And then following what we call those 4 days, imagine empowerment, then we go into community meetings. And so in Morocco, in rural places, what comes out of that process? What's the most common priority identified by the people? Water for drinking and irrigation most always ranks among the very top. And fruit tree agriculture and medicinal plants is always among the top priorities. Why? In Morocco, 70% of agricultural land generates just 10 to 15% of agricultural revenue, and that's because of the reliance on barley and corn. More than 50% of these staples have to be imported. Fortunately, in Morocco, there are 14 varieties of fruit trees that grow organically. There are multiple subspecies. There's 10 varieties of fig that are endemic to Morocco. We have the Al Aziza date in figig, in the eastern part of the country, that a variety that exists only there in the world. We have dozens of medicinal plants that grow wild. And so the Xe Atlas Foundation builds nurseries with the people to achieve their fruit tree goals. Right now, we help support, manage 15 nurseries in Morocco. It's about 2.2 million trees generated every year. We're in the process of building 4 more that will get us to, 4 will be the largest of all of them. We'll get to about 4 million trees in the middle by the spring of 2024. One of the things that we discovered is the demand for trees were requested of trees in places where we did not implement the Imagine Empowerment Workshop followed by community meetings. This year alone, we've provided trees to around 10,000 farming families. There's 63 provinces in Morocco. Around 52 we've distributed and planted trees. What happens when we simply meet the tree demand? We have 15 full-time empowerment trainers, and it's not enough. We found that when we precede planting with empowerment and participatory planning, increases in women's literacy, increases in girls' participation in education, increase in income benefiting directly women. And what happens when we simply transfer the trees and meet the demand as requested of us? By the way, half of the 2.2 million are Carib. I'm not sure in other nations, but Carib in Morocco, if you water it its first few years, it grows as a forestry tree. In Morocco, it's classified as a forestry tree, as is argan. If we simply meet the tree demands without the imagined participatory approach, increases in food security, increases in household income, 0 increase reported among women experiencing directly the income benefit. We've seen families relocate to cities as a result of the income, but in the rural places, 0 increase in girls' participation in education. In Morocco, we struggle profoundly with the precipitous drop in girls' education from the primary to secondary levels. About half continue on to secondary, and then it's cut in about half again from secondary to high school. So, of course, it's important to know that an organization dedicated to peaceful participation, we're dedicated to projects beyond agriculture, cultural preservation, artisanal crafts, school infrastructure. Our staff is around 91 people. We have now 26 who simply monitor the trees for carbon offset credits. We are now verified with Plan Vivo. I say this because the revenue generated, the benefit of Plan Vivo, I'm sure you know the different standards that are out there. The great benefit of Plan Vivo, they enable 80% of the 31 euros per carbon offset unit that's sold, 80% returned back into community projects, which enables the building of the school infrastructure and the artisanal cooperatives and projects beyond the agricultural sector. So much for the PowerPoint. I'll share 1 or 2 more thoughts. In relation to youth, our challenge is remaining true to the imagined participatory approach, which is incredibly intensive and emotional. What we found in the wake of the earthquake, we are based in Marrakesh. The earthquake struck the El Haus province of the Marrakesh region. that the imagined methodology that I described to you, as humanitarian organizations come to the Xe Atlas Foundation, we've been able to distribute around 300 tons of relief materials as a result of the partnerships we have, using the agricultural networks that I'm referring to, using the same transport system that allows us to transport thousands of tons every year of agricultural products, of materials. That same network allowed us to distribute 300 tons of relief materials, food, blankets, tents, warm clothes. But the imagined methodology I referred to, the humanitarian organizations from around the world visiting us, talking about psychosocial therapy, we juxtaposed their methodology with the imagined methodology, and we felt that there was a trauma healing benefit to the approach I'm describing towards sustainable development. But we now know on a methodological, practical level that that is so. And so our trainers are consumed by the delivery of psychosocial empowerment benefits in the earthquake hit areas of Morocco. So we no longer have the team necessary at 15 empowerment trainers. We don't have the team necessary to engage on an agricultural level beyond the earthquake struck area. And so how does this connect with youth? Our limitation to scale is the extent that we can engage and facilitate these community-driven experiences. A tree, for us, is layered with relationships, an intensity of thought and feeling and contemplation on a personal and collective level. And we know the consequences if we engage not in that way, that we actually can stratify gender relationships even more by concentrating material and food and decision-making and resources on the farmer, which is the male. 1% of the Earth's property is owned by women. So youth are essential, and university partnerships are essential toward training experientially young people to be the empowerment trainers, to be the facilitators of participatory methods. And so a major concentration of our effort is partnerships with Moroccan public universities. Right now, we have worked with 3 in Marrakesh, Fez, and Beni Mellal. With these experiential programs funded by the Middle East Partnership Initiative, National Endowment for Democracy, and others that enable us to bring young people out to these very places, experience the 4 days, and over time begin to facilitate one session at a time, to where they become the facilitators of people's empowerment in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this advocacy. For my side, I return 3 main points of your very committed speech. The first one is getting youth on board. The second one is to ensure that women are more involved in production processes. And the last one is to integrate experimental learning program into higher education institutions. So thank you so much for this speech, very interesting. So I suggest to move on the next presentation from Eduardo Rojas Briales, please. So Eduardo, sorry, your CV is so long that it's impossible for me to summarize. So among your many hats, I would say you are a forestry specialist, having earned a PhD in forestry at the Polytechnical University of Madrid. You have held many high-level positions at both national and international levels, including Assistant Director General and Head of the Forestry Department at the FAO, But among all this position, it's the teacher that we are going to benefit from you today, since your presentation deals with training needs in forestry sciences in the Mediterranean. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, bon après-midi. Thanks for inviting me in this important conference, and I welcome the fact that CIHEAM is enlarging to forests more actively. I think this conference is an important step forward in that sense. It's difficult to catch your attention after some very inspiring presentations the last minutes. I will try to bring some conclusions regarding how should the education of foresters look like. And the first reflection is that foresters in this century will have to cope with very complex challenges that were not in the past. In the past, there may have been others, but very complex challenges. And the first one is to be able to manage the time and the space dimension in the same time. And this is something that is not an easy issue, and it is something that in many professions, either they have the space or they have the time, but both together are difficulties. And very especially in the space area, as forests are that vast. I know they are not now very popular, but I put just the biggest forest nation, Russia, 800 million hectares. This is really hardly possible in a brain, Brazil 500 million, in a brain to encompass this amount of area. And this is especially to nanotechnology is really a big challenge to manage the enormous areas. But sometimes we go to narrow issue. And we have colleagues, and urban forest is a very important element also for the education needed for this dialogue that Christine Fassi commented before. And that suddenly the dimension is much smaller. And so this is a little bit a complex issue to deal with this different spatial dimension. And also it brings that as forest management is a very extensive activity, that at the end, with very few exceptions of subtropical and tropical plantations, that even forest management is not understood by many people, because you may come in a stand every 30 years. If you do the right things in many forests, you should end in half of the rotation. So if the rotation is 100, you should not eventually do nothing except surveillance of fires and the pest for 50 years. So many people think 50 years, no management, this is abandoned. No, it's just that you leave the stand, become mature. But I would say that I don't know if even worse is the time dimension of forests, as the cycle is long, 100 years, which economic activity in the world has 100 years. The few countries that are able, because they have a lot of credit internationally, the latest debt they can emit is 30 years. So we're speaking about more than 3 times that. But we go back to fires. Forests burn in minutes. So, and this is very difficult. It's like when you put this, when you get certain age and you have these glasses that have the different dimensions, very difficult to pass the thought of 100 years. And sometimes you're thinking about the next generation. Many forests have one species and then the next another species. So the cycle becomes much longer. And suddenly you have an issue you have to decide in few seconds. And also what we manage today has been determined by the management of previous generations over hundreds of thousands of years, how the soil looked like. All these processes have affected a lot. So we have to have a knowledge about what happened thousands, hundreds and thousands of years before. And these 2 dimensions need to be integrated. It doesn't help that we're just thinking of one or the other. Just think, for example, in many parts of Europe where there were wars, when you suddenly have to be acknowledged that there may be mines, so there could be any explosive material or iron in the trunks. These kind of things. There was a battle, or this area he didn't have, so there's no risk. So this dynamic and integration is difficult. This makes that a strong foundation in geography and history, but including paleohistory, not just the most immediate one, is very important to all this, what yesterday Magda provided, very important to think about what happened. Many people think that the Sahara was green when we had the ice time. It is not. It was after the ice time, where the weather became much more warmer, that the Sahara was able to catch the humidity of the Atlantic in the opposite direction that is normal in the tropics, And the highest level of humidity in the Sahara was about 6,000 years, the high moment of Egypt. There's a logic. It could not be a big power in the middle of a desert. And then it became drier as the climate became cooler. So all these issues are very important. And the integration of these different disciplines is critical. And this is quite different to other disciplines, especially agronomy is much more specialized, but doesn't need to go that far, or other engineerings as well. And just to recall the spatial issue, that forests at the end, to 80% are bulk areas of forest. The forest in melange with agriculture happens in certain border areas. But basically the good land is agriculture, and what doesn't sell for anything because it's too remote, too cold, too acid, too inundated, or too steep slope are forests. And at the end, it is a bulk area. So it is at the end, those areas that are not desert due to drought or coldness, that are of poor quality. That's why we have, and these massive forests sustain very little population, but they sustain population that has also a right to an equal living standard as they appears in the agriculture and urban areas. These two dimensions are not enough if we want to get into concrete issues, and you have to integrate additionally many natural, social, and basic and applied sciences, natural, I put here the list, social, geography, history, anthropology, but also technical. You have to integrate agronomy, that is a very near related discipline, mechanical engineering, if you want to process wood or cork, or infrastructure, construction, architecture, marine, how important was wood for the construction of ships until 150 years ago, and how much it was important, this linkage with marine and forestry, especially for the marine dominating countries. And also this cultural dimension that has been commented by a few people these days. And additionally, forest science has developed subdisciplines that are own, like inventory. Of course, there is GIS getting there, but there is at the end a part that is poor forest, silviculture, forest management, protection, utilization, non-wood forest products, wildlife management, and so on. So, and additionally, and this is related to the previous discussions, in the, especially Christine's presentation, the forests have become in urban society an emotional icon, especially related to these two key environmental issues like climate change and biodiversity. And this makes very difficult, objective and factual debates. We just discussed it, and in a certain way, a kind of a salmon challenge, that you have always to swim against the current in order to make things understand. In the 19th century in Europe, against the last deforestation and turning the deforestation back and so on, and now post-truth. But of course, if we don't have a consistent knowledge from past and present, we will just fight like with sticks in the fog. I don't know if you use this expression in English. In Spanish, we use it quite frequently. Or additionally, you will fight the symptoms. What we have observed, all the forest fire community is maturing today to this understanding that by focusing on the start of the fire and just the suppression, we are in certain way just fighting the symptom. And if someone really has a deep illness and we only supply aspirin, we are not going to solve that problem. And of course, forests can provide key resources through the bioeconomy. That was the issue this morning, reducing the dependence on fossil fuel and minerals and reducing the CO2 emission. So we need them and we need to manage them properly. And very importantly, and frequently underestimated, like also and very related to this traditional knowledge that was commented by several speakers from the Maghreb, the knowledge that we have accrued for sustainability is very important to move forward. And there was a slight intermediate that I did yesterday, but it's not in this version I sent, which all this is even strengthened and more difficult in the Mediterranean context. Why? Because only the Mediterranean forest around the Mediterranean, not the Mediterranean climate forest, have on one hand have the stress of summer drought and winter rain. That is, so the rain is in the dry in the cold period and the drought in the warm period. This doesn't happen in the rest of the climate, so that is a stress. The second stress is we have a mountainous environment, which is a very important restriction, and we have an old heritage population here, and this makes at the end that the relation between what whoever managed, the state, the communes, the private owners, managed to get a reasonable revenue. That's also how agriculture works. And the relation between that marketable output and the real output is the worst in proportion. And this generates, opposite to pollution, Americo Mendes' work on this it's called macro decoupling. The more you produce something that society is not paying in proportion to what you can sell, the more you have a poor allocation of resources. A lot, and the opposite. That's why who pollutes a lot in comparison to what they produce, they have a wrong allocation of resources, too much, in this case, too little. So there is a big problem in this area, especially in the Mediterranean area, which is much less, is much activated in areas like Boreal, where the orography is easy, it is easy mechanical, there are few people, the heritage of management is less, and things are much more simple. So the recommendations are, we have to provide a stronger way to social sciences, further than just economy, especially countries that came in a given moment out of dictatorship normally didn't have social sciences except economy. And there is a strong inert. And that's why the journal that Max Kropp started, they put first forest policy and economy in order to overcome this inertia, but because forest policy was at the end just an issue of Central Europe and a little bit the Nordic countries just 60 years ago. And the increased capacity to understand and integrate disciplines that originally are very far in a pragmatic approach. This requires certain complex skills, and very important, as you cannot be a specialist of everything, that at the end you understand in the different disciplines you have to integrate the dimension of order. It's not about 30.346, except the area that is today easy to determine. In forest, this is not the issue. It's important that you are not confusing 30 with 300, that you more understand what is the most important, what is the first, what interaction, and understanding and getting and strengthening skills in searching win-win solutions, understanding tenure issue, also how the tenure was in the past. Sometimes there are tenure issues that have been underlying for hundreds of years and need to be tackled. And that are very important, these tenure issues, the social architecture and communications. And on the other hand, this opens broad professional opportunities for foresters outside the conventional sector that are on the long term very positive for the social recognition. Think about urban forests. This is not the original purpose of foresters, but if the campaign 1 million trees that New York City and other cities had in the US was extraordinarily important to place the Forest Service that was around there and to show urban people that didn't go 3,000 kilometers far to the mountains of the Rocky Mountains to see federal forest, that they knew the activities of the Forest Service. So this kind of new activities may be an important pathway also to bring our message, and also overcome disproportionate humbleness. There is a lot that has been achieved. I just put you an example. Some of you have worked in emergencies. The emergency software and concept that the World Food Programme and FAO applied in crisis is the one of the Forest Service, defined by foresters. But this was the one applied on the 11th of September. And frequently, it is sometimes, I think foresters are too humble to bring forward and share with society what has been brought forward. Or the ruins of Empúries from the Greek near Girona, they were found by the afforestation of the dunes by foresters 120 years ago. Otherwise, they should be there, but no one can find it. So there's a lot of contribution that has been done that is little known. And I end with this photo of, not of my country, but this issue is similar to other countries in the Northern Mediterranean. There, we were able to turn the tide in the very moment Forest Services started, and the socioeconomic tendency also was aligned unexpectedly. The landscape changed dramatically. And fortunately, we have some pictures. This is from France, Mont Ventoux, but in Spain, we have thousands of these kind of pictures where you see how the landscape were 100, 150 years ago, how they are today, thanks to a combination of factors, but for sure, the activities of foresters and the Forest Service. So it is possible, it is not speculation, there are results. Just recall the Nuremberger Heide between Hanover and Hamburg, especially for the colleague of UNCCD, they had in the 18th century dust storms in the middle of Europe. And today not, because it was planted. So there is a wealth of experience, and I think it's important to put it also in value. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rojas Briales, for this tribute to the Mont Ventoux. And yes, for this presentation that suggests a different way to move forward, and which highlights the training needs for tomorrow careers, such as a natural or social science, but also on mediation, on leadership skills. So we will have surely the opportunity to come back to this subject later on during the roundtable. Now I would like to welcome Mrs. Rivera Lima. Yes, you're welcome. So okay. So Mrs. Lucia Rivera Lima, you works at the FAO, more especially in the Youth Mediterranean Working Group. You are an anthropologist and sociologist. You works in the forestry division at the FAO and on youth employment with the International Labour Organization. And you focuses on the socio-economic dimensions of the rural and agricultural world, more precisely on the interrelated challenges of child labor and youth employment and on indigenous people rights. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I will start my presentation. So earlier today, somebody asked me why it was important to talk about youth and why it was relevant, and also what was the difference between youth and the older generations. And I think that's actually a very relevant and pertinent question, because it can be answered from many different points of view, right? And I will answer it from the International Labour Organization point of view, who defined that this generation, this youth generation, is now considered to be a generation at risk. And this is from the employment point of view of the crisis, right? So in recent years, youth have become a key target for development strategies and policies and interventions. For example, the FAO has defined youth as an important group whose needs must be addressed across all of FAO's problematic work areas, such as gender. But there has been then an increase in youth mainstreaming, let's say, in all of the programs and projects and policies, which is similar to gender, right? But the difference is that we are all youth once in our lifetime, not like gender. So this youth mainstreaming can also actually be also a risk. So I will be focusing in this case mainly in the Mediterranean youth and also in the forest sector. So as you can see, young people between 15 and 29 years old represent the major age group of the Mediterranean basin. But there are, of course, strong inequalities between the North and South Mediterranean. So from a demographic point of view, the North Mediterranean countries have a low natural population growth. So that means that most people are over 40 and are older, while in the Southern Mediterranean countries, there is a high rate growth and most people are actually under 30 years old. So this means that in any case, in both cases, young people are actually very important for decision making. But how do we really define youth, right? It's not really just an age. There is no generally accepted international definition for young people, meaning that each country has its own national definition. So some countries define it from 15 to 24. Some countries define it from 15 to 35, depends on the context where we are. But FAO defines it from 15 to 24 just for statistical consistency. However, this is not really the real youth age, because it doesn't cover the transition period from youth to adulthood. And this is what we're going to focus. So there is this transition period into adulthood that can be evenly divided in 3 other sections, which is the personal transition, meaning people start assuming responsibilities, people start getting married, having kids. This is personal. There's the educational transition, which also represents people who are studying, people who dropped out, people who already finished studying. And then finally, there's the transition to work. And then this entry to the labor market might be very complicated and difficult, because there are many socioeconomic factors that affect this transition into the adult working life, including discrimination and social disadvantages. So now what is happening with Mediterranean youth? And then what is happening with Mediterranean youth in the forest sector? So as you can see, well, in general, according to the ILO, the worldwide youth unemployment rate is actually very high, at least 3 times larger than the adult rate. And this is also the case for most Mediterranean countries. And you can see it here. Youth unemployment rate and NEET rates are very, very large in most Mediterranean countries, whether they are in Europe or in North Africa. And then this has been the case as well for the past 10 years. And then you can see here, for example, there are several peaks. There's the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, that affected disproportionately young people as well. So youth unemployment in the Mediterranean is actually very complex. And it can be really, it can define several structural issues within each country, let's say. So this school to work transition can be very difficult because it can represent 2 things. So early school leavers and low levels of education represent low-skilled youth, which we expect. But then it's not the case, because education doesn't always guarantee employment. And you can see a lot of skills mismatch, and also university graduates who cannot find work opportunities. And then there is the polarization of the labor market, who is never in favor of youth. There is the formal and informal market entry, and youth, as being less experienced, they usually have more access to informal employment. And similarly, permanent and fixed term contracts, usually youth never have access immediately to a permanent and fixed term contract. Okay, so such challenges are further accentuated to gender. We're not going to dive into the gender differences right now, but it is obvious. So most of these obstacles towards youth employment have immediate negative impacts at personal levels and also at the entire society levels. For example, at a personal level, it is more difficult to achieve autonomy, and it is more difficult to be considered as part of your own community. And at long-term consequences, the society suffers as well. There are also larger scale issues. For example, we can see that some countries have higher risks of youth radicalization. We can see that is happening frequently, but then also migration from south to north. Just a very quick overview of what government responses can do towards youth unemployment is that they can adopt these as public policy fields, national youth policies, national employment policies that focus on youth, and also youth employment strategies, TVET strategies, and labor market policies. But this is not equal everywhere. For example, in the European Union, countries adhere to the youth guarantee, which facilitate this, all of these policies. Countries must adopt these policies. But in other countries in the rest of the world, that is not the case. So such countries are lagging behind and are barely adopting some national youth strategies that sometimes include little aspects on youth employment. So finally, what is happening in the forest sector? We don't know, because there are many gaps to understand what is happening on employment in the forest sector. First of all, because there are very few studies on forest-related employment, and mainly also focusing on young people. There is also an information gap between North and South, developed and developing countries, and there is also further gaps because of the lack of agreed-on definitions and different data collection methods. So, of course, not all countries report information, and this complicates comparability. And the fact, as I said before, that there are such high rates of informality and seasonality within the forest sector makes it even more complicated to actually track how many workers there are. There is this new trend happening towards decent youth employment in the forest sector. You know that the forest sector contributes to the green economy and therefore to sustainable development. And here you can see that it provides direct and indirect opportunities. This is all, let's say, part of the just transition. And the just transition is important because it defines a paradigm shift towards sustainable and just policies. Sustainable regarding nature and environment, and just regarding people and communities. And here you can see, for example, that there are several overlapping thematic areas on green forest jobs, which can be actually new jobs, existing jobs, or also very ancient jobs, as they were describing before. So these 7 overlapping thematic areas can be further divided into examples of green forest jobs. So you might recognize some of these, but then here you might find as well some new jobs within the forest sector. Okay, so this is just an overview of what youth employment is in the forest sector. But now I want to talk about youth engagement, because young people are directly and indirectly concerned by government regulations. Indirectly, because as we saw now, they access public services and opportunities in education and employment, thanks to the legal frameworks of their own countries. But directly, also, it's impacted by their relationship and participation with the state and public institutions. So a big area for youth in Mediterranean forest sector is participation, especially in decision-making processes and knowledge-sharing events. And I think this point is very relevant and important today, because you can look around and count how many youth there are. How many of us are actually under 30, under 35? So this is not to criticize, but it's a fact. It's an undeniable fact. I'm sorry. And this is felt not just now, but also by many other youth and at even larger scales. The feeling, and it's not just the feeling, but it's a fact of being left behind in participation and consultation. Since more policies, programs, and projects are now focusing on youth, they want to work with youth. There is this big youth mainstreaming, meaning that there is this youth checkbox that needs to be ticked. Oh, we had 5 youth at our conference. Okay, but this leads to a risk of youth tokenization, meaning that youth are only invited to be present, but not really participate, not really share. They're just ticking the diversity box. So, of course, at regional and global levels, this is happening in the recent years. And this is mainly as well happening at the global level, at the forest sector level as well. So to respond to this, there are several youth engagement and participation initiatives happening. So young people are increasingly engaging and leading efforts not only to promote sustainable forest management and biodiversity conservation in the region, but also to reinforce their participation, employment, and overall opportunities. And I will share with you an example that we are leading within Silva Mediterranea, which is the Mediterranean Youth Task Force. The task force was first organized last year during the 7th Mediterranean Forest Week, when we had a youth dialogue, and that produced a youth statement highlighting the challenges and opportunities of young people in the Mediterranean forest sector. And out of this dialogue, the task force was born. And I invite you here to scan the QR code to learn more about it, either through the website and also through social media. But just overall, so that you know, it's a network of young members who are actively engaged in the forest sector of the Mediterranean region. They are either from Mediterranean countries or living in them. We do not exclude. And it is a space, it aims to build a space for inclusive capacity building, knowledge sharing, and youth empowerment, with contributing to the inclusion and engagement of young people in forestry issues in the Mediterranean. And of course, it envisions a future where young people can contribute to decision-making processes and policy dialogues, but also propose and lead and adhere to innovative actions in the forest sector. So, recommendations summarizing everything that was presented. Practically, the availability and representativeness of data on forest-related employment in general, but also on youth, is needed. So agreed on definitions and data collection methods are very much needed to understand what is happening in the world of work and forestry right now, and that could happen in the future. Same for data on youth participation in the forest sector, because in some countries, young people's associations are considered as key stakeholders, but not everywhere. So little research has been done about youth participation in forest policy process. Then talking about the green and just transition, green policy packages are key to transitioning towards the green economy. And these are very important because they provide opportunities for decent employment for youth within the forest sector, and also contribute, of course, to sustainable and inclusive structural transformation and economic diversification. But then these need new skills and training opportunities, skills, certifications, and requalifications for older workers as well. So, of course, new policies need to be thought about through education, vocational training, and other initiatives that can enhance employability of young people and forest workers. And of course, the recommendation to avoid youth tokenization and include young people to participate in decision-making processes, to share their knowledge, perspectives, and ideas. And just to say that there is a need to think and act youth to translate political commitments into youth-responsive programs, initiatives, and services. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucia, for your commitment as a youth representative. So it was fresh. And thank you for this presentation in which you paint a portrait of Mediterranean youth. You say that Mediterranean youth is the most representative age group in the Mediterranean basin, but that is unemployed because of few qualifications. And at the same time, the forestry sector plays a key role in the green transition and in the development of the green economy and provide jobs. So we could surely find a link to solve this issue and move forward. So this is the time for the discussion. So the floor is open, please. Feel free to ask questions after these very interesting presentations. Yes.
J'ai une question par rapport à la dernière communication. Est-ce qu'on peut parler d'une jeunesse méditerranéenne? Et je fais un parallèle puisque le parallèle a été fait par rapport au genre. Comme on ne peut pas parler d'une femme, de la femme, il y a plusieurs femmes. Je crois qu'autour du bassin méditerranéen, il y a plusieurs jeunesses dont les besoins ne sont pas les mêmes, certainement, les niveaux d'implication non plus, et probablement il y a besoin de différencier les approches par rapport à ces catégories de la société, et dont certaines pourraient être vulnérables, mais pas toutes. Parce que même dans les rangs des personnes âgées, il y a des catégories vulnérables aussi.
Questions?
Lucia, you want to answer?
Thank you. Oh, you want to ask something?
In the same sense, there is no problem of employability in the Mediterranean, but the young people refuse to do some works, some activities. Such as agriculture, shepherd. For example, for Tunisia, the salary of one shepherd is the equivalent of the associate professor, and we cannot find shepherds.
Thank you. I think both questions kind of relate to each other, or both comments relate to each other, because it's true that we cannot talk about youth and homogenize young people as general ever, especially within the Mediterranean. I was showing at the beginning, European countries are older, they have less youth. Youth have different types of access to other opportunities, such as the ones created on their youth guarantee program. And young people from the north, the south countries have less of these organizational opportunities as well. And then there is, of course, rural youth, there is rural women. And to answer, okay, young people don't want to work, but why is that as well? Maybe the employment opportunities or the sustenance opportunities in rural areas that young people are facing are not ideal, and they are seeking to this ideal to migrate, to leave, to look for something better. But then these come from structural issues that are not simply because they are lazy and they don't want to work. It's because also of many social, economic, and cultural issues that have been lost throughout the years. So we have to think about why young people are preferring to migrate. They are not continuing with their traditions. What other opportunities are they seeking, and not oversimplify and say that young people no longer want to do these types of things. Maybe if the situation and the local opportunities were better, their reaction would as well be different.
Yes. Just a very short question to Lucia. What's the meaning of youth tokenization? Yes, just to you, Lucia. Lucia.
What do you mean? Was there enough youth organization?
You have said youth tokenization.
Yes.
What is that? What's the
So
meaning?
it refers to the fact that, for example, young people have now become a popular subject and a popular theme. And it's like a checkbox that everybody needs to tick, you know, like gender. First it was gender. Oh, women. We need to, but by the way, gender is not a synonym of women, but a lot of people assume that it is. So by saying gender, people assume that they need to include women. And so the gender mainstreaming sometimes is oversimplified. to saying that we need to have half of the beneficiaries as women, and that's it. It doesn't matter to go deep, to dive deep into the problematics or the issues. So the same thing happens sometimes with young people. And this is referred to as like youth tokenization, meaning that young people are used just as tokens. And it's very common now to say we need young people to participate. Okay, let's invite young people. Maybe they can bring the coffee for us, you know? So it's kind of the same issue without really including young people. So we need to reanalyze our participatory mechanisms to understand how to include young people well, especially since we are creating a lot of policies, a lot of programs, projects, everything surrounding the development world, even within forestry, agriculture, fisheries, all of these areas are trying to include more young people, but how? So this is the risk of youth tokenization, just ticking a box and not really designing well-made participatory mechanisms for young people to act.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, exactly.
No.
Magda?
Yes.
Merci. Donc là, j'ai pas la solution à la question de l'emploi, mais je pense toujours à une piste. En fait, récemment, on a organisé Young Leadership Program à FIMED quelques semaines, et à l'image de Lucia, on avait vraiment une représentation extraordinaire autour de la Méditerranée, qui sont tous pleins d'énergie, d'idées, pas du tout lazy. Donc, c'est pas les genres de personnes qui attendent. Mais je pense que la solution, c'est pas de leur donner du travail, mais c'est de les armer à créer du travail, à ce qu'ils soient entrepreneurs, à ce qu'ils soient... Parce que maintenant, il y a des opportunités, il y a des possibilités d'emploi dans le sens, il y a plein d'appels à propositions, mais on les arme à préparer, à prendre eux-mêmes l'initiative de créer des choses dans lesquelles ils sont bien, plutôt que d'attendre, de postuler et d'attendre. Et toujours des gens ont besoin de X années d'expérience, mais qui va leur donner cette expérience? Je pense que ce côté-là dans l'éducation, c'est travailler un peu sur ces skills d'entrepreneuriat qu'ils osent faire, et qu'on encourage le secteur bancaire aussi ou autres, de leur donner la possibilité de commencer à créer avec un minimum de taxes, etc.
Et je voudrais juste rajouter aussi que les choses doivent avoir un sens. On le sent de plus en plus, ça, que c'est important aussi pour les jeunes étudiants ou nos enfants aussi.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I just want to build on what also has already been said, but linking things. Yeah, youth is not a token, but if we are not kind of mindful, it will become. So I truly agree, because it's become like when you are having a program and then they will look into what is the gender, what is the youth, and if you are not careful, it will be. I just wanted to share an example of some of the youth we call ecopreneurs. And last year in February, we organized what we called a highlight in the Sahel with youth from 11 countries. And these youths were young women, young men, are dealing with ecopreneurship. And most of them came with some products which really on top, meaning that, for example, in Mauritania, a girl came with some coffee made out of the seeds of the dates, and was very well packaging and was looking for kind of market and how to do the package and marketing. A young girl also from Chad came with using the paint and art on a kind of restoration, and working with the women, linking it with the culture for reforestation, for example. And there were so many these examples. It's just to say that maybe even here, when putting the idea, maybe when we are having this type of gathering, when she asked the question of under 35, you didn't see my finger. I think it was there. But I think we could maybe organize also what is the highlight of the youth entrepreneurs or ecopreneurs in the Mediterranean region, and have them be more participate and maybe coming or drawing it for the question we are raising here. What are the psychology suffering of the forest? We talked about this morning. How do we talk about forest restoration? How do we look into all these topics where we are looking and saying that is missing a missing point or connecting the dot in the topic we are talking, so that they might bring this. Maybe it's a reflection we need to do, because we see the importance of education, we see the importance of the youth engagement, and maybe changing the way even the forest is pursued by the forester themselves also, and by the society. It was very interesting listening this morning to see that it's both sides. There are a kind of how you see the forest. For me, as a non-forester, as a water person, when I'm in the forest, I just look at that. It's beautiful and that's it. But yeah, you are sure. If you cut a tree, I will say, why did you cut it? But I don't have all the knowledge of why it had to be cut. So I think there are some education and some linkages with both the social, both the cultural, and the youth bringing might be the solution to bring it. I don't pretend to have a solution, but I wanted just to make this reflection. Maybe we could try to build on it. Thank you.
Teodoro?
I enjoyed very much your presentation. I found it very interesting. Thank you very much. It's nice to have, young people together. And my question is related to that. I mean, what do you think about the several ways that we should, we normally organize events for the young people. They're the kind of devoted only to young people, like being a separate body of our community. And maybe this should be even, changed in order to have, to really be part of the group with no distinctions on the age, but taking into consideration the fact that you bring new blood, new ideas, and new challenges to the rest of the group. Thank you very much.
Merci. Une petite information. Ce que vous dites là conforte notre attitude. Au GIDE, depuis 3 ans, nous organisons tous les ans avec un partenaire le prix des jeunes espoirs africains pour une agriculture et une alimentation durable. Dans 6 pays africains, nous avons 500 demandes, on en sélectionne 6, un par pays, mais effectivement, c'est extraordinaire. Ce sont tous des entrepreneurs sur des sujets alimentaires, agricoles. C'est vraiment extraordinaire à la fois le potentiel de ces gens, leur dynamisme. Cette année, sur les 6 pays, nous avons 5 femmes et 1 homme. Et donc, nous sommes très, très heureux d'appuyer cette démarche. Et nous allons continuer dans les années qui viennent, bien sûr. Merci.
Oui, moi j'aurais une petite question pour Yossef, qui va s'éloigner un petit peu de ça. Perhaps I can tell it in English. It's for Yossef. I want you to give us an idea of what has become of the millions of trees distributed over these last 20 years, and how much land has been reforested in the Moroccan Atlas. What are the benefits, and can we say that this project is a successful project? And can we compare to the green dam or the green the great green wall we heard yesterday, and how we can compare and have a lesson from this project? Yossef, you advocacy for it very well.
Yes, I would have 3 comments to Lucia. First, already more than a decade ago, I would say it was 11 or something like that, FAO Forestry established an MOU with IFSA and worked quite intensively with them. And I recall the last World Forestry Congress in Seoul. There was an intervention of IFSA in the opening and very strongly. So regardless, I don't follow the, let's say, the internal process of the MOU, but I think this is still in this frame. So I think that there has been something done in this area, at least in the forest level. The second issue, I think it's important if we use statistics, that statistics have a strong inertia. The situation in which the southern European countries, from Greece to Portugal, used to have a very high youth unemployment has dramatically changed since post-COVID. The last 2-3 years, there is really full employment in youth and in old. It's a totally situation turn. The last week, due to the fact that the generations are very, very short and the economy recovered very strongly in the Northern Mediterranean, I mean. But there was a strong problem. This is in the moment not the case. The third issue I want to comment is that we have in general a very weak disproportion about information in the non-biophysical areas of forest inventory or petaset forest information systems. Due to the fact that the COSTI are the forest inventory of areas, stocks, carbons, and so on, this has in certain way eaten and overshadowed the needed for really a sound forest policy. You need a broad information. And the more you get out of these biophysical issues that are relatively easy and there's a lot of knowledge, and you go to the more social ones, despite in theory they could be extraordinarily cheap, you don't have it. Even related to Christine's presentations, the social perception of following the social perception, I proposed through a PhD of a colleague 16 years ago in Spain. It costed 50,000 euros to do it every 3 years. It has not been done. And they spend millions and millions in the inventory in the field. It is necessary. But in proportional social issue are not, no. And if we go to Africa and the informality, at the end, the people, when they take firewood or whatever, it was common yesterday, the issue of Uganda, they do it as autonomous, as self-entrepreneurs. There is an enormous lack. And with that lack, this is critical in Africa, but don't think that firewood in Italy or Spain is much better disregarding. It's impossible to draft a right policy where you are just with the sticks in the fog. And this is really a strong need, because I'm sure at the end it will not cost more than 10% what we invest in the biophysical information to have the social information of tenure, of, for example, the tenure information of FRM. I was responsible for it. I didn't got to divide also a third category of communal forestry. Communals are diluted between private and state. Communal are not state and are not private. It's a different category, impossible. Public and private, and these kind of things. So there really is a need to, if social issues are so important, that we have the commensurable effort to get sound information. Without that, we can analyze a case, a small case, but you cannot upscale this case, and we're just guessing. And that's really, in the other side, we are not doing this.
Yes.
The national side.
Thank you, Eduardo. Now we give the word to Yossef Ben Meir to reply to the question he has been posed, and we stop the session.
For the first 15 years, we gave the trees for free to the people. They requested the trees, it was provided for free. The survival rate was in the low 60s%. We have 26 people now full-time. They monitor trees, 14 points of data they gather on the polygons and the tree, the breast height, the soil, and so forth. Now we charge 20 cents US per tree. In Morocco, a carob tree is around 25 dirhams, about $2.50. A cherry tree close to $3. An argan tree, $1.80. Whatever the variety, the farmer pays 20 cents. And that allows for the currently 15 nurseries to reseed. The 15 nurseries are financially sustainable. Importantly, the survival rates went up to 78% today. It was an important lesson that our partners required of us. Ecosia, important investor with us, they require, in order to partner with them, they said, you're going to have to charge at least some symbolic price to the people, and it made a profound difference. The other thing I'd say is this: the 15 nurseries are built on land provided without cost from the National Agency of Waters and Forests, but also the Moroccan Christian community. the Moroccan Jewish community. They have land in different parts of Morocco that they're willing to provide in kind for the farming families to build their nurseries. We have more land for nurseries than we have finances to plant. That's a huge transition over the 20 years. When we first went to Waters and Forests and asked for land for people's nurseries, it was laughter. Now we have a national partnership where we can pick the region where we can request land and receive it. That's another major change over the course of these 20 years. Charge the people trees 20 cents, varieties they choose, and they plant where they determine, and your survival rates go up.
You are totally right. Thank you very much, Joseph.
Okay, yes. I think if you agree, we will close this. Thank you very much for this additional comment and very interesting debate on these very interesting topics.